My guest today is country superstar Sammy Sadler, who continues to honor the legacy of 80s and 90s country with the release of his latest single, If I Had a Cheating Heart. Now, originally a top 10 hit for Mel Street in 1978, written by Wayland, Holyfield, and Turney, If I Had a Cheating Heart has become a favorite among country traditionalists, and Sammy Sadler's take on the classic track proves that his timeless style continues to resonate with fans of authentic country music. Now, with a career shaped by determination and raw talent, Sammy has carved out a story all his own in Nashville. He's first gained national attention in 1989 with his charting rendition of Aaron Neville's Tell It Like It Is, followed by You Made It Easy. But his momentum was cut short when he was seriously wounded in the same shooting that took the life of Cashbox chart director Kevin Hughes, an incident that has become known as Murder on Music Row. But Sammy Sadler is excited to be doing selected shows with singer-songwriter Dave Gibson on their Hits in History tour. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome country music superstar Sammy Sadler back to the show. Welcome, Sammy.
How you doing, Ward? It's so good to be back with you, man. Thanks for having us on.
You bet. Now, first of all, how have you been doing, and has it been a bit busy year for you?
You know, we're just now putting everything together with, as you'd mentioned, with me and Dave Gibson on the Hits and History tour, and we were in Nashville last week, and we just really kicked it off there at Chiefs last week on Broadway. We had a great show, and we're looking forward to bringing this show out of whatever we can do the rest of 2025 on into 26, and man, it's going to be a great show. Dave's not only a great singer, man, but he's a great storyteller. So I think people will be, I think they'll be entertained and get their money's worth if they come and see us.
Well, what are some of the songs that you're bringing on the tour?
Well, you know, for myself and my show, I'm bringing back some of the 80s and some of the 90s hits. And then I'm going to be doing, obviously, some of my songs and some of the stuff that I've done and charted here in Texas and on Billboard. And then some of my new album that I've got already recorded and just kind of waiting on to put out here as we go a little bit later. And Dave, you know, with him, you're going to get stories behind the songs, and he has written so many iconic songs of the 80s and 90s in that era. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, he's wrote Jukebox in My Mind for Alabama, If It Don't Come Easy for Tanya Tucker, Ships That Don't Come In for Joe Diffie, Heart Trouble and Midnight Fire for Steve Warner. I mean, it just goes on and on. The hit songs that he's written for so many other artists.
Now, are you going to be bringing some of the songs from your last album in which you had sung with other 80s and 90s superstars in country?
Absolutely. I'll be doing some of those songs on the 1989 album we had back out in 2021. So I'll be doing some of those and just some of the great songs of the 80s and 90s music. So absolutely.
Well, I love that, and actually, I went back to listen to that 1989 album, and I mean, you had Marty Robbins from Shenandoah, sang Cumberland Road. You sang with T. Graham Brown. I mean, the list goes on. Bluest Eyes in Texas. So, those are songs that we all grew up with the 80s and 90s, and those were monster hits on country radio.
Absolutely. I think Church on the Cumberland Road with Shenandoah, you know, Marty Rayburn come in and sang with me on that. And I think that was their first number one record. And, you know, man, to have Marty and Larry Stewart of Rest His Heart and T. Graham, you know, him and I have known each other through the years and shared the stage with him a little bit. And, man, it's just what a humbling experience to have those guys come in and sing with me on that album. And on my new album that I've already got, I've got some more iconic guys that are going to be on this album with me. So I'm so excited about trying to get that out. And I can't reveal who it is right now, but I've got some of those guys that are iconic guys from the 80s and 90s. And just again, man, what a humbling experience to have those guys come in and sing with me. And I really appreciate them doing that. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, I still think it's one of the best. I think it was the 80s and 90s. And then I just said, ladies and gentlemen, I know you heard me. I said Marty Robbins, but part of my mind is still in the old country, but it was Marty Rayburn
Yeah,
from Shenandoah. But
but
and
Marty Robbins was a great one too, man. So he was one of the guys that I listened to. So he's one of the greats as well.
well, to me, Sammy, I loved 80s and 90s country because, when, we can look back and think when Randy Travis came out with Forever and Ever
Yeah,
Amen, it set country music on fire and everybody
yeah.
jumped back into the traditional sound of country music. And I still think country music is still one of the strongest genres of music today.
Well, I believe that there is a resurge in 80s and 90s country music that's coming back. And, I'm not knocking anybody out there. Everybody's got their own lane, but I really believe that people are missing uh, the 80s and 90s country music, and there's a hunger for it out there across America and in the grasslands. And we're just so thankful. I can only be who I am, and I have to, the song has to touch me and has to resonate with me in order for me to record it. And I hope that will come off, and I hope that that'll resonate with somebody that hears my music, because I feel like if I try to do anything than who I am, then I'm really selling out. And I believe people will be able to see that and won't be able to resonate with me. And so I have to stay true to who I am, and I'm just an 80s 90s country singer.
Well, and and you're probably going to agree with me with this. I think the best hooks for songs came from the 80s and 90s in country because
Yeah.
all of the monster hits, and there were a lot of
Hmm.
acts back in the day that it was one hit right after the other, but the great thing was is that the
Yeah.
fans could literally sing along with the songs. I don't see that too much in today's country.
Well, the era that you're talking about, Ward, I mean, even going back 70s, 80s, 90s country music, I mean, that music touched your soul, and I mean, it can get to you, and that music can touch you where nothing else can touch you. And it's about real life experiences and about love and heartache. And I mean, today's music, I mean, I'm not, again, man, I'm not trying to knock anybody, but it just, to me, it just doesn't have the meaning and the soul that the 80s and 90s country music had.
Well, I actually miss some of the sad country songs, and we don't hear a whole lot of sad ones hardly anymore. A lot of them are just, it's like the chorus is being sung over and over again. They're upbeat, they lean heavy to the pop side, but people
Yeah.
still hunger. I mean, I was talking not too long ago, I was talking to T.G. Shepherd. He was shocked that I
Yeah.
actually loved 80s and 90s music, and I said, that is like the strong, like you said, even the 70s. Those are the strongest decades for country.
Yeah, it really is, and some of I believe some of the best and greatest music was made in that era. And, it's just, again, that music, is so personal, and it was about love and heartache. And like you said, I mean, there's a lot of people don't want to play a ballad, but man, I mean, I still love ballads, and I'm a ballad singer. And some of those songs are very strong songs, and have depth and meaning to them. And I'm going to keep cutting them whether they like it or not. I have to record what I love and what I relate to. And again, I just don't think that uh, somebody's going to be able to relate to something that you don't feel, and it doesn't touch you. If it doesn't touch me, I don't see how I'm going to be able to relay that to the audience. And all I'm asking for, my record days are probably over, Ward. As far as having a radio record, but if that, I'm not going to say never, because Colonel Sanders didn't make it till he was in his 70s. So I'm not going to say that, but it would be nice if we could have a hit record. But for me, it's just about being able to go out and sing the songs and tell my story of what I've been through and what I've survived. And if I can do that, and I might be able to touch somebody or change somebody's life, then I feel like I'm still doing my job.
Well, Sammy, it's like when you had your first hit, "Tell It Like It Is." It was, you did the Aaron Neville song, but the thing
Yeah.
is you and the other artists back in the day knew how to sell a song because when we would hear it, we felt the emotion. We felt like we were part of the story. We could create the video in our head when we heard the song on the radio. And, but when I was listening to the new single, If I Had a Cheating Heart, which was by Mel Street back in 1978, and what absolutely amazed me was your voice is still as fresh as it's ever been. And so, why did you want to record that song?
Well, I didn't even know Mel had cut that song because when I heard it and whenever I got to know the song, my friend Ricky Lynn Gregg had it out in 1993, I believe, on Liberty Records. And, being from Texas, me and Ricky Lynn had met each other and we become friends. And I fell in love with the song whenever he had it out. And we started doing it in our live show back in the 90s. And then I did some research on it and saw that Mel Street had it back in '78. So there's a long history with that record, but here we are 30 something years later. And I just love the song, as well as there's a couple other things on my new album where I've went back and I'm bringing it back to a whole new audience and people that might not have even heard these songs or records. And I'm just trying to bring back songs that I loved and songs that I fell in love with. And hopefully, like I said, it'll resonate with the audience out here and somebody will hear it. Even though they think it might be a new song, it's not a new song, but it is a new song. And I just loved it. And that's the reason I recorded it.
Well, it is a perfect honky tonk song because it's
Yeah.
upbeat, it gets you moving. I mean, when I first heard it, I was like, because with you singing it, it sounds brand new.
Well, thank you.
And I just loved it. And to tell you the truth, I've been sitting in my office. I just have it on repeat because the song is so freaking good. And and like I said, your voice has never aged whatsoever. And tell you the truth, I don't think any of the acts from the 80s and 90s, I don't think any of their voices have aged, which is why everybody flocks to see everyone. And you and I know, the proof of the power of 80s and 90s music was when Brooks and Dunn brought the house down at the CMAs, and all of these, even George Strait, he could take 5 years off, step on stage and sell out a stadium.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of those guys, T. Graham Brown and Exile and TG and all the guys you were mentioning. I mean, those guys are sounding just as great right now as they did 30, 40 years ago. And, I got to see Exile and them a couple of weeks ago down here in Texas and got to hang out with them. And man, those guys, they've been together 62 years. All of the original members are together and they sound amazing. And, I'm just thankful that God has gave me a voice and I feel like I'm singing better than I've ever sang. And so is the other guys that we mentioned. And we're just blessed by God to have the talent and the voices that we do have.
Yeah, I think there's something about music, especially with musicians and recording artists. I think there's an anti-aging factor that as long as they're singing, they're recording albums, they're touring, it seems like they can keep that going well from what we've seen so far up into their 70s and their 80s.
Well, I believe, you know, I believe that music, like I said earlier, touches you where something else can't touch you. Music can get to you where nothing else can touch you in your heart. And, look at Willie. He's in his 90s. I mean, uh, I believe that's what keeps us going, and I believe that's what keeps these guys going is the music. And just like when Glenn Campbell was out there, even though he was starting to lose his memory and stuff, he still was able to go out and do shows and remember the words. And so I believe it's the music that keeps us going.
Well, a lot of people don't realize with Glenn Campbell that the very last element that he lost with his battle with Alzheimer's was his ability to play music. That was the last thing he
Yeah,
lost. So it proves how much power there is with music. It's
right.
emotional. it does something to our senses. And for you, why is it so important to keep the traditional country music alive?
Well, I mean, again, man, I mean, that's who I am, Ward. I mean, that 80s and 90s country music, that's what I grew up on. And, I just love it. And, when I was a kid, I loved Elvis, and that's who that was my big deal. That's probably who I idolized, at the time. But then whenever I started growing up, my parents introduced me to country music. I started listening to George Jones and Merle Haggard, and Marty Robbins, and Johnny Cash and all those guys. I just love country music, and I love that type of music.
So, are you still asked about Murder on Music Row?
It is. I am Ward. Everybody wants to talk to me about it. I'm the sole survivor of it. And I'll never be able to get away from being the survivor of the Murder on Music Row or being involved in one of the biggest black eyes country music has ever had. But there's so much more to Sammy Sadler than being the survivor on Murder on Music Row. I've got my music and my voice. And, the way the police treated me when all of this happened, it overshadowed my career. And it took away my opportunity, I believe, to have a major record deal in Nashville because of the content of what all this was about. It ended up being about payola, and Kevin Hughes was an honest man, and people were trying to give him money underneath the table to move their records up the charts, and he wouldn't take their money, and they had him killed over it. It was an actual hit that happened, and I had no idea that I was going to see Kevin that night or we were going to be together, but I'm so thankful that God thought enough of me to save me and give me a second chance. I'm never going to go away. I'm never going to stop pursuing a career that I went to Nashville so many years ago. I'm going to continue to sing and tell my story. That's one thing that they can't take away from me is my voice. And I'm going to stay out on the road and hopefully be able to touch somebody's life with what I've been through and what I've survived.
Yeah, I know that because I've read your book, and I know that you and I had covered that whole subject in our
Yeah.
previous interview. But ladies and gentlemen, Sammy Sadler has the voice, he's got the talent, and he's got the songs. And so when he's on tour with Dave Gibson, you got to go out and see Sammy and Dave. And it's funny because you're touring with Dave Gibson, and you brought up Steve Warner, and you said that you as well as a balladeer. Um,
Yeah.
and I still remember all the Steve Warner songs because that's all he ever sang about was love, and but that's what music's all about.
Well, Steve has been a really big influence on my career, obviously, and I've gotten to share the stage with him and open up for him, and then he's been gracious enough to come in and sing on one of my records that we had, and he's such a great stylist. He's a great producer, guitar player. He's an artist. People might not know that he paints and does artwork. But Dave, uh, when I went to Nashville, when I was 18, 19 years old, I remember we were looking for songs for my album, and they had called over and said, "Hey, man, we've got a tape ready for you. Come over and pick it up." Well, I went over to pick up the tape that they were pitching me songs on, and I don't remember if I rang a doorbell or knocked on the door back then, but I went over and it was the Oak Ridge Boys Publishing Company, Silverline Gold Line Music Publishing, and the door opens, and here's this guy with long hair and everything, and was told me to come on in. It was Dave Gibson, and so he was the first guy that I met way back in the day. And here we are, all these years later, touring together and sharing the stage together and telling the stories and the hits behind the songs. And it's just a surreal moment to be together with Dave and bringing this show out with Dave Gibson. And like I said, if you don't know who Dave Gibson is, he was a part of the Gibson Miller Band back in the early 90s, and they had some hits as well. And then Blue Miller ended up passing away. And I don't know if Dave ever really went back after a recording deal again. But again, he has written some of the most iconic songs in country music. And if you come out to see this show, you will hear those songs and you'll hear the stories behind those songs. And I think you'll be entertained and really learn the history behind some of the things that's going on with our careers.
That's what I love. I love the storytelling because I think it makes the fans appreciate not only the artist more, they appreciate the songs that much more because now they understand the story and it just adds depth to the whole thing.
I believe it. I believe it does. And like I said, I believe if you want to hear some good country music and see this show, you're going to get that. You're going to get that brought to you with myself and Dave Gibson, and you'll hear some stories and things behind things that you normally wouldn't hear if you just went to a concert to see someone. You'll be able to hear some of the history that I've lived through and been through, as well as Dave Gibson.
So, how many dates do y'all have on the tour right now?
Well, we just now put it all together here, uh, Ward. So we're getting all this put together in the late back end of 2025 here. So, like I said, last week in Nashville was our first show, and we're starting. We've got a few booking agents starting to book dates for us. So we're just now starting to really put things together. So just be watching on our social medias and our websites as we add to the dates that will be coming in that we've just now started putting together. We just got word yesterday the Josie Music Awards that's being held in Nashville. They've invited me and Dave to be a part of that. So we're going to be at the pre-party on November the 1st. Me and Dave's going to do about 30 minutes apiece on the Josie Music Awards pre-party before they have the show on the November the 1st. So we're excited about being a part of the Josie Music Awards. And again, we're going to be starting to add tour dates. So just watch our websites and our social media. We'll be adding to it and letting everybody know what's going on.
Well, we'll shout it from the rooftops for you, Sammy. So, what's next for Sammy Sadler?
Well, we're kind of, I'm going to be writing another chapter to my book, A Hit with a Bullet, that we got out. So we're going to be adding another chapter to that. And we're just finishing up totally the album. We've got just one more thing we've got to do on it, and it's going to be finished. And we're just going to be trying to get these dates to get out on the road so people can see us, feel us, and hear us again out there, Ward. Because that's what we live for as artists, is to be able to go out and perform for the audiences. And if you want us to come to your hometown, if there's something going on, a festival or a rodeo, whatever it may be, reach out to us on my Facebook, which is Sammy Sadler Official, or get in touch with us on SammySadler.com and get in touch with us and give us a venue or the people that you might want us to talk to. We'd love to come and see you. That's what we live for, is to come and perform for you, and so you can see us and we can meet you and say hello to you.
Well, I'll tell you this right now. You and Dave need to come out here to Dosey Does here in the Woodlands in Texas.
Well, you know what? I'm going to be there at the award show this year, and hopefully, we're going to be able to talk to Dosey Do. We'd love to come down there and bring the show to your area and see all the people. So maybe that'll be one we can get on the books for you.
Hey, well, I'll be there with bells on, Sammy.
I'd love to see you, man. Thank you.
Well, you bet. And ladies and gentlemen, look, for all of us country music fans, we know that the power of country music moves people, and there's nothing better than the 80s and the 90s country music. I mean, every single artist ended up being a rock star with their own songs and hits just rolled out just like water coming off a waterfall. So, and Sammy Sadler is one of those. So, get ready for the tour with him and Dave Gibson. And of course, you can hear Sammy Sadler's newest single, If I Had a Cheating Heart, on your streaming music platforms. And look, check out, it's the perfect honky tonk traditional country song that we all need right now. So head over to SammySadler.com for more of his music, the upcoming tour, and I can't wait for the future album to come out. And Sammy, you got to come back to talk about that new
I'd
album.
love, Man, I'd love to. I'd love to share it with you. Like I said, it's going to have a couple of iconic, guys from the 70s, 80s, and 90s on there with me. And I'm so excited to be able to share that when we get it out. And thank you again, Ward, for having me on your show and telling everybody about my story and my music. And you guys go out, call your local radio stations, email them, do whatever you got to do to request If I Had a Cheating Heart by Sammy Sadler, and tell them to play that record. And thank you again, Ward, for everything you do for us guys. We appreciate you.
Hey, you are absolutely welcome, Sammy, and you always have an open invitation to come back to my show anytime. And ladies and gentlemen, again, go to sammysadler.com. And when Dave Gibson and Sammy are in your area, make sure you buy that ticket, go to that concert, enjoy the backstories of some of the most iconic country songs, but at the same time, enjoy the incredible songs that they're going to be bringing to you to sing. And hey, buy the merch, buy the ticket, enjoy the show. And again, Sammy, I want to thank you for joining me today. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back with more.